Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Apologies for the late Zoom link. I didn't realize it wasn't on the event page.
Zoom is weird.
All right, more folks are coming in. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining. I did want to put in the background some things that are happening right now in Minnesota. Let's see. Okay. I'll keep admitting folks here. So if you can, while we're waiting for folks to join in, if you want to drop in the chat where you're calling from. Dun, 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 dun. From Tucson. That's great. Thanks. Las Vegas, Utah. I'm like CLC, Utah, Salt Lake City. It all makes sense now. Yes. Well, thanks for joining. I'm in California. I'm in the San Bernardino County area, which is about 60 miles inland from Los Angeles. And let's see. Dun, dun, dun. Any more folks joining? We'll take a look. Dun, dun. So we've got some good, semi-good news coming out of Minnesota. I'm going to um, play this.
Minneapolis real quick. We'll get back to this.
Let's see. More folks joining. And we're going to share the sound. Here we go.
Tom Homan just wrapped up some remarks, and he's saying that the mission in Minneapolis has been accomplished and that they are going to conclude the surge of ICE agents in the area. But he's taking questions now. So let's listen in and see if we can get more layers on what's going on here.
Operations are run and executed nationwide. God bless the men and women of ICE, men and women of the Border Patrol. Appreciate everything you've done for us.
Boo.
Also, with sincere gratitude, President Trump and I want to thank the men and women of ICE and CBP and partner agencies who have been assigned here during Operation Metro Surge. You achieved a great success for the Minnesota communities. Thank you to your families as well, because I know they sacrifice also. Thank you, President Trump, for your vision, as well as your support and confidence in these brave, dedicated patriots that work hard to deliver on your strong commitment to law and order, public safety, prosperity for American communities.
Oh my gosh.
Today we have the most secure border in American history. We are seeing record numbers of people being arrested and deported. Your promise to make America safe again is being played out every day on the streets of this country. I've said it many times. I worked for 6 different presidents, 10 different administrations. No one has done it better than President Trump.
Ah.
God bless this great country. I'll take questions now.
We'll take a couple questions, no follow-ups. I'll start off with Frankie. Yeah. Mr. Hellman, as
immigration enforcement continues across the country here in Minnesota as well, how do you hope to gain the trust of individuals here that have kind of been wary of seeing federal officers on the street, but let's say 6 months from now, we still have the office here, we still are enforcing immigration across the country. What do you hope things to look like, and what are you asking for the public?
Look, I just want people to look at the data on what this administration has done. You know, the number of public safety threats we removed from the streets across this country that makes these communities safer. ICE has had an office here for decades. Before it was called INS, Immigration Naturalization Service. This footprint will remain here, and they'll continue to do immigration enforcement here. But as President Trump has said from day one, we're going to prioritize the public safety threats. Again, but prioritization doesn't mean forget about everybody else. That means you have a criminal alien here and non-criminal here. The criminal always comes first because he's the biggest threat to the communities. We're going to continue to force immigration law, but we won't get back to the footprint here, the normal footprint here. But there will be some security teams staying here, the QRFs, until we're assured that those agitators, incidents either stay low or further decline. I'm not going to remove everybody out of the safety of officers, but like I said, and Operation Metro Surge is ending. And in the next week, we're going to deploy the officers here in detail back to their home stations or other areas of the country that are needed. But we're going to continue to enforce immigration law. That's what the American people voted for. But it has to be a priority of criminals. And look, I hear all the hate about, you know, you should arrest everybody. Well, we are. But we're prioritizing those who are the biggest threat to our community. The rapists, the murderers, the child molesters. That's the right thing to do. But I'll say it again. President Trump made a promise of mass deportation, and that's what this country's going to get. But it's smart law enforcement to do target enforcement operations. Now, I've heard people attack me using the word targeting. I sat for the last 2 months when I watched this operation, daily press briefs are talking about targeted Title VIII operations. Nothing's changed, other than we're going to make sure they're targeted and make sure we know who we're going for, what their immigration record, what is their criminal history. That comes first. But enforcement of Title VIII is not going to end. If you're in this country legally, you're not off the table. And I think we're proving it if you look at the data.
Eric?
Mr. Homan, just had a question about the final number of arrests you had and how many of those people arrested were those targeted security threats you were after?
I don't have that exact breakdown. I know we made over 4,000 arrests here. That is something a local field office can supply. I don't have the exact breakdown. But I can tell you, since I've been on the ground, they've been target enforcement arrests. I believe there were target enforcement arrests before I got here. What I did is create one chain of commands where everybody knows what everybody else is doing, and integrate operation command centers. There were some issues here, and we addressed those issues. But I'm not going to sit here and say anybody did anything wrong, and that they were unprofessional.
Nope.
I'm going to say there's some issues here. We fixed those issues. We've had great success with this operation, and we're leaving Minnesota safer. The surge is leaving Minnesota safer, Minneapolis safer, because of the cooperation we got with the counties and the state and local law enforcement responding to our needs. I'll say it again. It's less of a sanctuary state for criminals.
Yeah, sorry to go a little off topic here, but can you confirm that CPD actually hit a party balloon instead of a drone with a laser during the incident in El Paso? And why wasn't that action coordinated with the FAA?
I have no information on that. It's out of my league.
We're going to keep the questions to Minnesota topic. Go ahead.
Mr. Homan, can you specify how many county sheriffs, local jails have agreed to work with you and honor ICE detainers?
I have not met one county jail that says no to us. They want to work with us.
Okay, we have time for one more. Go ahead.
Yes, hi, Mr. Homan. You talked about this unprecedented level of cooperation between local officials and yourself. Can you explain more what is changed now in terms of that cooperation from before?
Several things have changed. First of all, when when the agents were out doing operations and the agitators got a hand and posed a public safety threat, not just to the officers, but the communities,
How many of you are kind
law
of done
enforcement
listening to
response
this
has been
guy?
sporadic at best.
I think I'm done.
At what you see now, what you saw this past weekend, is law enforcement is responding
Yeah,
to public safety needs.
let's go ahead and stop that. So yeah, good morning, everyone. You know, the news that ICE is out of Minnesota, or at least removing the surge, right? The surge of in ICE of ICE in Minnesota. Um, it just seems like justification, right? Just complete justification for the abuse and violation of human rights. Um, and then, but also a spin on what the resistance of that the community has done, but a spin to like make it seem as if, this was their decision. It just makes sense. We've got all the rapists now, so we got them all off the streets, and so that therefore we're done here. But one of the things that he mentioned, again, Tom Homan, uh, director right now of Homeland Security, part of ICE, was we are not we're keeping the safe streets in these sanctuary cities. And what that demonstrates is that the Trump administration going after cities who have declared that immigrants, their immigrant neighbors, who are, hardworking, perhaps even refugees from other countries, sometimes war-torn countries that are, that some of our U.S. policies have created, um, need for folks to emigrate from their community, from their home countries. It just shows that um, specifically it is the targeting of anything that actually demonstrates any kind of humanity, and kind of the things that, some of the great things that the U.S. actually does stand for in terms of, the tired masses, um, yearning to be free. No, we don't want that here. That is the absolute uh, uh, status and assertion that the Trump administration wants to make. And so, if you were here last week or a couple weeks ago, ICE out of everywhere. It was a national day of action for Minnesota. I think, besides the positive spin of the Trump administration and Tom Homan himself, of, they're making these decisions, these strategic targeted decisions, they are responding to the pushback and the resistance of people in the streets, especially in Minnesota. And we'll talk a little bit more about what happened in Minnesota, in terms of like how they got here and how they were ready, and sort of my intention behind this, the keep continuing to organize, with the guide of, or with the guy under the guise of, um, it is resistance to ICE, absolutely, in some of the most brutal aspects of the Trump administration that we are witnessing, but also, just the real need to organize, um, for the long term, because it was sort of, the left and liberals, and so, I would assert even just decent American citizens and voters and community members, that this is not the kind of country that we want. This is not the kind of country that we deserve, and that we want to leave for our children. And so it is imperative that we organize, um, to respond to the worst things happening now, as well as how do we continue to keep each other safe, and how do we build a country and a nation that, that we just have better elected officials, right? We just have better policies, and we have better folks, better hearted, decent folks really representing us and our deepest priorities and our deepest principles and our deepest values. And so um, there was a kind of a conversation of and this was a couple of weeks ago, back in January. We wanted to welcome folks. We wanted to do introductions, give some background and context. But I really want to just kind of slow down. And there's a handful of folks of us on the call right now. I would love to hear from you and sort of like what brought you to the call right now, um, and and in the meantime, I'm going to keep checking in to see if folks make sure that folks have the right um, Zoom link to join us. But yeah, please, somebody, if you want to unmute yourself and say hi and sort of what brought you here, I would love to hear that.
Hi, can I go first? Um, my name is Michael. I'm a community college student, and I am interested in, I want to help keep my neighborhood safe and like protect, in case ICE or like some like government agency like shows up. My neighbors are immigrants, and they're really good people. I'm a little bit nervous. I don't really know where to start with organizing, and I want to, and my neighborhood's a little mixed in politics. Uh, so yeah, I just want to learn about some of the stuff.
That's great. Thanks, Michael. Does anybody want to go next?
I'll go. Hi, my name's Lisa. I'm from Las Vegas. And I would say exactly the same thing that Michael said. I've actually lived in my home for over 30 years. And so I know a lot of my neighbors, and I know for some folks, what side of the whole path of history they're on. And so it is touchy. You don't want to be approaching, I don't want to do anything like a blanket notification to my neighborhood because I'm going to get crap from neighbors. And I've lived here for over 30 years. They know exactly where I live. So I want to gather as much knowledge as I can about organizing my neighborhood before I really dig into it.
That's fair. Thank you, Lisa. How about Debbie or Sally?
But the real fled from a country.
Hi, this is Debbie. I had to figure out how to unmute myself. As everyone else, I wasn't um, as ambitious as to be able to organize a neighborhood, but just to get an idea of what it would take to create any type of organized group. I've only lived here in Vegas for about 2 years. I moved here from Texas, and so I don't really have any ties to the political structure here. I'm still learning. The government here structure is a little bit different from Texas. So just trying to figure out what's the best way to address the issues, not just with the people that I've met living here, but with the elected officials also.
No, makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, it's Sally. Let me think. Why? Okay. I got so frustrated listening to the news or watching it or reading it, and I felt in my body like I have to do something to get this out of my body. I have to go to a protest. I have to do something. And since the next protest I think I know about is the end of March, I had to do something, and logging into a call at least makes me feel like, oh, tell me what to do and I'll do it. I'll keep calling my reps, I'll do whatever. But today or earlier last week when I signed up for this, I thought that's the next right thing. I'm going to do that. That's something I can do.
I appreciate that. I love that. I love that. Yeah, what's the next yeah, what's the next right thing that I can do? Right? Because I one of the one of the contentions of a lot of folks on the left is and really again just decent people at this point is they want to keep us sort of immobilized and unsure of what to do next, um, and how to do something that is effective or of value or can really again help people. um, and so there is a couple of things that I wanted to share from the presentation we did last week. I'm sorry, 2 weeks ago. Um, and it is sort of this idea that 5051 had put together um, in how do we like what are the next steps as a community that we can do, and maybe this is the bigger part of a community, and then we go micro into organizing our own like our own block, our own neighbors, and just sort of um, sharing these thoughts and these ideas with people. So we know what happened in Minnesota was this big surge, right, of ICE and federal agents coming into Minneapolis in particular, and really just blanketly targeting neighborhoods and just taking people from the streets. That is happening here in my city and Fontana, which is again San Bernardino County. It is happening throughout the country, but without this massive surge, right? It's like it's a it's two or three vehicles maybe that you'll see that look kind of sketchy in terms of they've got super, super dark tinted windows. They're, these gigantic, usually gigantic like trucks and SUVs that are just, big old gas guzzlers on one hand, but also just, sometimes out of state license plates. Or when we do see a California license plate, and actually there's a website that you can like run your the license plates, and they're not even valid plates. And so, those folks are then just kind of uh, patrolling, I guess they would call it, neighborhoods, and then just looking and seeing who looks like a target. That is absolutely, racial profiling. That for years the courts have said that that is illegal, and now we have Trump um, federal courts across the country saying no, that's totally fine. So that's happening across the country for sure. People, our neighbors, are being targeted. And sometimes it's it's family members, extended family members. It's classmates and coworkers. But in Minnesota, what happened, and what happened to how they were able to respond was they have a history, two decades or more, a history of political organizing in that immigrant communities were brought into the electoral work, which was why they have a top ranking um, one of the highest ranking elected officials of indigenous background. Peggy Flanagan is the lieutenant governor. She's currently running for Senate in Minnesota, which is what we need, right? We need a better Senate. um, and then, but throughout the state, they have congressional reps, state reps, city council members, school board members who have been organized and supported by their communities towards a progressive agenda that does welcome immigrants, does include those voices into the the ether of how they govern and the policies that they have in place. many states don't have that strong history of sort of block by block organizing so that newcomers are and are deeply embedded into the community, so much so that when a community was targeted, when a very a constituency of Somalian immigrants or a constituency of Hmong immigrants, when they were targeted, um, the community understood that that was an attack on the whole community. It wasn't to like leave those folks on their own. And that did come by, again, that block by block organizing. And that is really scary right now to because we still have a good chunk of folks, right, who are agreeing with some of the worst things that are happening. And that this Trump administration and the policies that they're putting out, some of them we will be redeemed. The courts will show that these were illegal, these were not only ineffective, and did not keep our streets safer, but they were actually illegal and improper when it comes to the rule of law, to human rights, and to just standard decency, of how we want a federal government to act. So going back to then what can we do now? ICE out of everywhere. There was a National Day of Action, and I do have that was January 31st, a couple of weeks ago. And then, but what do we do from there? And so here's one of the things that we could start to do with wherever you're calling from. So, your folks coming from Las Vegas and Utah, is to join with your rapid response local local organization, and take some of the trainings that they might offer, the Know Your Rights trainings, and how to safely observe or respond to reports of ICE in your community, of ICE activities in your community. And there is a nationwide network of organizations, and those, again, they're all they're based in local groups, who have been doing this work for years, for sure, but obviously have had to respond to the national crisis that the Trump administration has totally put us under. So there is the one, publicdefenders.us, and I'm gonna see if I can drop this in here and share this. Yeah. Publicdefenders.us, it does have a list of rapid response hotlines across the country. So hotlines across the country, and we scroll down and see if there is. How do we get there? Resources. To view all resources. So here we are. So I will drop this link in the chat for you all as well. And here we go. So you see the different other national organizations that also have information, training, resources, and perhaps even connecting to local more direct information. So here we go, the hotlines across the US. This is so weird. It feels like it's not, you might have to actually, oh, there it is. It's actually a document. So here we go. Here is the document with a list of folks throughout the nation who are doing work, who you can talk to, who you can report to. So that's sort of like that first part is really get connected to your local rapid response uh, network. Does anybody have any questions about this?
You said you'd be posting the link in the chat. Is that the link to this document?
Yeah, let me do that now. Here's the website, and then here is the link to the document. While you were talking, I was able to find out, find my screen to pop up where the chat was. Yeah. And then going back to the actual immigration um, subpage, um, again, connecting to the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, the ACLU, Immigrants' Rights Projects, the National Immigrant Law Center, the National Immigrant Justice Center. And then they have a We Have Rights video series that you can watch and share with folks that maybe even don't have don't don't know like what their real opinion is. Like because they're sort of maybe they're buying into some of the propaganda, maybe some of the talking points. Maybe what some folks need to learn, right, is actually that um, the Declaration of Human Rights, our UN Charter, and the U.S. Constitution does not discriminate on who gets rights and who doesn't. Everyone that is on our soil, that is in the territories of the United States, inherently do have human rights. And one of those rights is to, be able to move freely, is to be able to immigrate when you need to. And so, and then when you are in violation of a civil, which is what immigration violations are, is a civil um, uh, a civil violation. It's not a felony. It's not a misdemeanor. It is not a criminal offense. It is a civil offense, and that's like a traffic ticket. But even then, we all, no matter the status of your paperwork, we are all entitled to due process and to an attorney and to access to legal assistance, and definitely not subject to illegal um, violations of our of our person, of our property, of um, and of like the racial profiling that we're seeing. So sometimes sharing this key information from places like the ACLU and the Immigrants Defenders Project and all of those places, sometimes just sharing that, knowing that information and then sharing it with folks who maybe don't, who again maybe are buying into the propaganda, that could be enough to just plant some seeds of like, oh, well, okay, maybe this isn't the best thing we should be doing. Maybe this isn't a good investment of our resources, and maybe human rights actually does matter. Um, that's one step. So connecting to your rapid response network, learning this information yourself. And then some of the other ideas that were thrown to us, that were offered to us was when there is anything that we see, that we hear about, that our rapid response networks are asking us to like kind of go investigate, like, hey, we heard, there's like there's a whole crew of vehicles that seem like they're ICE vehicles. They're at the local Hilton. Can we go check that out? Can somebody go check that out and confirm, like, what are and that could be just driving by and seeing if there's, 5 or 10, um, what we've known is like all white vehicles, black vehicles, sometimes even gray, but mostly black and white vehicles. Again, those big, those big truck kind of vehicles at a local Hilton or local something. And what they did in Minnesota and throughout the country is go into, call the Hilton and mobilize folks to just call and say, you should not be housing these folks. You should not be, this is a danger to our community and we want you to stop. So no housing for ICE. And we'll go into a little bit more of what that actually means. Um, and then don't serve ICE, same thing. Restaurants, um, coffee shops, we could actually, and some your local rapid response networks have actually, they probably have signs that said that this is private property, and without a warrant, ICE is not welcome here. And if we can start to do those sorts of, get small businesses, bigger franchise businesses, but who have ties to this community, our communities that we're in, um, don't serve ICE. Just make our communities not a welcoming place for these, thugs that are following at the, that are really, again, doing so much to violate the safety of our communities. And also, again, we will be redeemed legally. Many of these things, and the courts are showing some of the, are citing correctly that some of these operations are completely a violation and illegal. This is also why allies like you all on the call and folks, that is why your testimony, your witnessing, your participating in what's happening is going to help continue to keep our immigrant neighbors safe, but also build the case for that long-term justice that we know we will have. We just got to do the work as much as we can now. So don't serve ICE. And then, of course, the elections, anti-ICE primaries. There are primaries happening. Excuse me. There are primaries happening throughout the country in the lead up to the general election, and we need to know who's running, and we need to support the folks who have absolutely come out against these policies, against the Trump administration, against some of the worst things that they're doing. We need to know who they are, support them in whatever way we can, whether it's calling neighbors, going out into communities where some of the most challenging races are, and ensuring that those folks win. And then finally, building towards a general strike. How many of you know what a general strike is? Or if anybody could explain what that is for us.
Well, to my knowledge, a general strike is when businesses shut down, schools shut down, everything that regular people do is shut down until a change is made, whatever the
Right.
changes that the general population is asking for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so thank you, Lisa. On the slide here, building towards a general strike, it is a process. It is planning, because it's not only businesses shutting down, but it's the fact that consumers and community members don't participate in regular life. That sort of forces the businesses to shut down because there's no business happening. But that means, right, that puts working people at risk for like no paycheck. And so it is going to take, we can do it a day at a time, perhaps, and obviously give grace to the folks who cannot afford even a day off, which is a whole other thing, right, about our political environment and the status of working people in our country. But the general strike would be more than just a day, right? It would be a long process until change is made, until real change, substantial change is made. And many folks on the left, even before these very visual violations of our communities from the ICE activities, felt that a general strike was what it was going to take to really start addressing some of the bigger issues, not just right now ICE, but the climate crisis and the unaffordability problem and and perhaps the direction of so many of our resources into like a war machine that that is perpetuating endless wars and human rights violations across the globe, let alone here in our own neighborhoods. So there was always this feeling of general strike. We need to strike. Like it's so bad. It is, and sometimes that was hard to explain to folks who it wasn't so bad for, right? And so, but the ICE, just the devastation of what we're witnessing live streamed, every day, that was enough to sort of wake some folks up going, wow, maybe it isn't all okay. Maybe we do need to really seriously think about our systems. And so that general strike has always been, um, a thing that we would work towards, but definitely this latest assault on our community with ICE and what they're doing really has sort of changed that conversation. But all the same things are required. So I wanted to go back and I will share this presentation so that you can go back and find, look at the particular um, resources that each of the slides have kind of gathered for us. So I earlier talked about no housing for ICE. So Hilton brand hotels. I mentioned Hilton because across the country they have been one of the brands that has been housing ICE. So there is a bit.ly no housing for ICE, where more resources are, don't serve ICE, a bit.ly don't serve ICE, where you can find more resources, really make normal life inaccessible for folks. The anti-ICE primaries, here are some of the Democrats that absolutely need to be challenged because they have continued to side with and fund. And then it says, and as well as every GOP congressman besides Thomas Massie. And Thomas Massie from Kentucky is the only Republican that has actually come out very, very boldly um, and said that ICE absolutely needs to be defunded and inoperational. We need to abolish ICE, and he's the one who has the only Republican congressperson who has made that assertion. So we see Stand Up America. Those are there's some actions that you can take, sending out letters, letting the current congressional representatives, letting them know that we do not support their stance, that they and that we're going to work. We're going to work for their opposition to win and really take them out of Congress. We do need a different Congress. And then that general strike again. So we see generalstrikeus.com is sort of helping us understand and building towards what it would take to really sustain the most vulnerable in our communities, as well as the rest of us, if a general strike is what it's going to take. And this is also not to scare any folks, but this is also right. ICE is just, again, the most visual and most and scary attack on our nation. But President Trump has floated the idea that maybe we don't need elections, maybe we don't need certain things of a democracy. We have to be sort of under the mindset that this is not business as usual, and maybe a general strike is going to be the thing that disrupts all of the assault on our rights and our democracy and what we thought our country stood for, but we're witnessing every day how it's changing. So there's sort of the ideas behind not only just a day, a rally, but the long-term things, and the small things that we can build towards. So 5051 is one of the organizations, one of the leftist organizations like Indivisible, like the Women's March, who have been responding. And what they did was, poll folks who had been taking actions in different places, and this is how this was determined. And so you see, they also have a whole ICE defiance kit that we can visit real quickly. So ICE defiance kit. And make sure I have that right. ICE Defiance Kit, yep. So they have a whole Google Doc of things that we can do, things that you can, and some training and some understanding so that we're not feeling like we don't even know where to start or what to do. So again, the no housing, the don't serve, primarying those pro-ICE Democrats, as well as all of the Republican congressional folks, and then making elected officials take a stand is another idea. And this goes now back to the organize by block, because we do need to know where our local officials stand, right? And if our local officials stand with the community and stand with the human rights that all of us are entitled to, and will not welcome, right? We heard Tom Homan saying, "Oh, I haven't met a sheriff's department that doesn't want to work with us." That's a problem, right? Many of our local sheriffs are elected, and so there is an accountability to the community that they have, that to not just bow down to federal government when, again, courts have proven and our own eyes can see that it is brutal, it is violations of human rights, it is an assault on our community, and it doesn't make us safer. So our sheriffs, especially our elected sheriffs, are accountable to our community. And so those sometimes the organizing piece can kind of be hidden and folded into the political context that we're in right now, where again, I said we're facing that we're holding primary elections across the country. And so knocking on doors and finding out who's sort of under the political conversation, sometimes that's a safe way to not just come out and say, I'm here to, help my neighbors. I want to know who. It really is. That could be a context in which we can educate folks about it just by the political conversation. And then, and that way, block by block, we can know, we can start to either plant the seeds of real information, and we can also, and fight the propaganda of the Trump administration and the right, and we can keep us safe. And so the raising awareness, and perhaps those political events could turn into, could have space for a vigil, have space for recognizing some of the victims of ICE. Very much in the news is of course Alex Preddy and Renee Good, but they are not the only victims of ICE, right? There have been at least seven or eight additional victims since the new year, including them two. But last year, 32 people were killed in ICE custody, died in ICE custody because they weren't given access to medical care. Their medication was denied, or they were outright killed by ICE agents in the street. Extrajudicial killings that again are a complete violation the safety of our community and the sanctity of human rights, the sanctity of due process. No violation is worth it merits being killed on the street without a trial, without a judge, without anything but just a brute with a gun, and power, emboldened by this president. So we could distribute flyers. Again, many of those websites, the rapid response networks, they have informational flyers. You could, print out a 20 or 30 and go to a local coffee shop or a small business, in your community and say, hey, can we just leave these here so that again, we are getting out that information. And then if you have like a local laundromat or sometimes the coffee shops have like community boards, paste some of those up and saying, hey, maybe if you're, concerned about this, let's meet here on a Thursday, and then start those conversations and really just trust yourself um, that you're learning as well as other folks are learning. And so you don't need to know everything, but we do need to just come together and like find find comfort in that we're not the only ones feeling this way. Thank you for being on the call today. We did actually have about 40 people RSVP'd, but I know I didn't realize the Zoom link wasn't on there. That's why I'm recording this. So thank you for sharing, your coming off, off mute and sharing and helping others have access to this information. So I'll send the recording out to folks, everyone who RSVP'd, and we're going to meet again in a couple of weeks because we said, well, we'll try to like just keep reconnecting and building up this movement and sharing this conversation. Another thing that we need to do is recognize it begins at the neighborhood level. Yes, you're calling from Utah. Yes, you're calling from Nevada. Yes, I'm in California. And that is a community, of course, online that is helpful, and Zoom and all of the technology is helping us stay connected. But again, we're gonna build safety, and mutual aid and be ready for a general strike and be ready for um, doing the political electoral work that happens in our own communities for sure. And so just all the things that we just said, distributing materials, leafleting, sign campaigns, small protests, and connecting with other folks throughout our community. I would recommend uh, for those folks in different states, find your local Indivisible group. They might just be doing the rallies, but then lend your voice to them, knowing some of this information, having these resources. Here's some other things that we could do as well. So your local Indivisible groups, you're going to have some allies there. Your local 5051 groups, you're going to find some allies there. And then go to maybe even, I think, Michael, you said you were, a student. Go to college campuses, go to community college campuses. And there, in California, there's a thing called, there's a free speech zone. So every campus has a free speech zone. I imagine it's similar in other states, that a free speech zone is where you're allowed to like put up a table and hand out flyers to students. That's just part of, again, our standard human and American rights of being able for free speech and sharing information. See if that's a possibility, and that'll help you connect with maybe other students, or help us adults, older folks, connect with younger people to see what are they doing, what are they thinking, what information do they have, and how can we work together. The biggest thing, or the smallest thing, is really start small. Don't think that you've got to do everything, you've got to know everything. Just focus on what you can do right now. do know your neighbors. I loved that. I think it was Debbie, or no, it was Lisa. That's maybe it was Lisa or Sally, I think, who, have lived in your community a long time. Myself as well. I have lived in in my home, my husband and my family. We've lived here for over 30 years. Um, I do know my neighbors, but not like, deeply. This has changed. This has changed us where I have walked my block and mine and like say, hey, just checking in, hey neighbor, how are you doing? How are you feeling about stuff going on, right? And and maybe that's just the simple question, um to sort of help us get a lay of the land and map out where are the folks that are one vulnerable, where are the folks that are not on our side. But under the guise of, hey, I'm still a neighbor, I'm still here. Um, and we can disagree, but also we can go home and be double down on our commitment to changing the political realm, the policy, and all of these impacts. But we don't have to be challenging, right? Because again, we want to keep ourselves safe and we want to keep our community safe. But creating those safe spaces where we can have the casual conversations to help open dialogue and have that mutual support for each other no matter what. Um, Amplify locally. Once your block or neighborhood is engaged, connect with other folks. And again, some of the bigger organizations, Indivisible, 5051, maybe even your local Democratic club, your local third party club, the Greens, or Working Families Party is building across the country as well. Connecting with those folks to help then connect neighborhood by neighborhood, right? And just know that every little thing that we can do, you being here today, every little thing that we can do does make a difference because it starts to break down the fear and it starts to break down some of the misinformation and propaganda that we've been subject to. So every little thing does count and really make a difference. And so again, we have a small call. We have just 5 of us here. So I would love to hear sort of your feedback on what we've heard so far today and what you're thinking and ideas that, just yeah, let's open it up.
I guess I'm probably speaking for more than one of us when I say that like it's kind of nerve-wracking going door to door when you don't know if your neighbor's gonna, you know, get really mad at you because they're like a Trump supporter. And it's like I live with my grandparents and my dad, and I don't want us being harassed.
Right.
But so I guess it's just and also in the neighborhood that I live in, it's not in the city. It's a lot more spread out and definitely a lot more right leaning. Uh I think that there like in my area specifically, there's a need and like a lack of like organizing and community. I don't know where I was going with this. I just wanted to speak my mind.
No, sometimes just starting with like a clear idea or a clear like diagnosis of the problem. The problem is you don't have organizing, and it is scary to like think of knocking door to door. One caveat I will add is obviously don't do this alone. Find somebody, partner with somebody. Um, and maybe it is just a simple flyer of like, you know, what could that look like? Maybe it's, hey, and again, it doesn't have to be right. We don't have to name the thing first. Of like, I'm out here because I sucks and and Trump sucks and all of this stuff. I'm out here to just think of like, you know, we as a neighborhood, we as a community need to come together. And I'm just curious of, who else feels this way. And maybe that's that conversation. Maybe that's the initial thing where again, we don't have to go out and be really like put everything on a shirt, and saying I'm, fuck Trump. Although I would do that, right? No, but but we don't have to do that. Does that make sense, Michael?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. I know there's a lot of people who are just like turned off by people being like, fuck Trump, and they're just
Yeah.
like, well, hold on now. Let's settle down. I don't know. There's a lot of people that are just more focused on their personal lives than politics.
Right? No, completely true. And fair, right? So then maybe it's just acknowledging that people are so focused on their personal lives because they're just trying to survive, right? They're just trying to get through the day. They're just trying to pay the bills. They're just trying to enjoy time with family that, is short and brief and limited, right? So yeah, it makes sense to again maybe that approach and I'm thinking through this as we're talking um is more of like, hey, there's a couple of us here in the community that think that we just need to come together as a community because times are hard for a lot of folks, right? And maybe the entrance is just that, and the impetus for each of us here on the call for taking action is because we're seeing times are really hard because of ICE, because of Trump, because of this. But that doesn't change the reality that even before all of this stuff, times have been hard for folks. And our neighborhoods have been disconnected and our communities are um so stratified, but we don't know that for sure. We just know that because that's what the news is telling us. At the end of the day, it does feel right. Like folks say, oh, well, Trump got elected because the majority of people elected him. That's actually not true. He got the votes needed in particular states to get the electoral college numbers to win the presidency. Even if the numbers are true that he won the popular vote, in that a majority of voters voted him in. The truth of the matter is, the majority of people did not vote for him. And the simple fact is because not everybody voted. Of the eligible voters, it was less than 60% of eligible people who could have voted actually voted, which means even if he got the majority of that 60%, it does only mean 30%, 32%, 35% of actual people in our community voted for him. Maybe, maybe those are the numbers, right? In any one community, it could be a little bit, a little bit difference in terms of actual numbers. Is it 1 in 3 doors that we're going to hit? It could even be a split household where one person voted for him and one person didn't. Or, one person did and the 3 other people in the household didn't. And then we also know that Trump in general is losing support. The polls show that even the people who did vote for him, they're sort of seeing what's happening. They're not going to be vocal about it, but they are when responding to questionnaires and polls, they are not they're not all gung ho. The folks who are still very gung ho, they're very loud, but we have to understand they're also a very loud and vocal minority. They are not the majority. And so I think um, it will be, it would be a real exercise in like restoring our faith in humanity to maybe knock on some doors or just flyer in, in a location and see that overwhelmingly those folks will be a minority. And at the end of the day, as we start to talk to some of these folks and when with their anger and their vitriol, we'll see they're a very sad, angry minority that deserves some compassion, but even more need to see the rest of the community um, come together and not be not be broken down or not be torn apart by one or two really angry mad people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was thinking like, like a neighborhood barbecue is something that like, everyone, regardless of what their ideals are, would want to go to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Something small, right? And it could be a potluck with a little bit of stuff. That way it's not a heavy burden. And again, the conversation is, I just there's so much happening without like naming it all. People are having a tough time. I think we just need to come together, right? And then it ends that invitation. And I have also found that that kind of outreach and that kind of connection, um, folks will self uh, they will self uh, they will decide for themselves who they are and what and where they want to show up. So if it is out of community warm invitation, let's come together. The folks who are not ready for that, they won't show up. And and we have to imagine we have to imagine, it would take a tremendous amount of uh, of a really sad state of a personal being able to show up and just go, I'm going to go and just talk shit. I'm going to go and like tell people what's up. We are normal people um, that don't do that. That is not a natural way of operating or of being. And so it's really tough. I'm interested to hear if Lisa or Debbie, if you have any, and I love Sally. She had to go, but she said it was so helpful and empowering. So I'm glad.
I just wanted to share a couple things. Just the first thing was something that I read about in the United States. The basic unit of connection is neighbor,
Mm.
because so many people live far away from family. And so that's how we identify now, is by our neighbors and where we live. And
Right.
so that's a really key piece here, I feel like. And also, I understand, I totally understand, Michael, what you're thinking about and what you're nervous about and what you just said, Bobby Joe. But it's, when you think about it, if you're reaching out just to your neighbors for something, for just for your neighbors, the chances of somebody coming to something that you're planning and going off or being basically a troll is pretty small, because guess what? We know where you live too, right? People do trolling stuff because they're anonymous and they're hidden and they're safe. And so, let that embolden you and give you courage to reach out. And,
Right.
barbecue, boy, that's a big lift. I was thinking maybe coffee and donuts,
Right.
start
Oh,
really
we
small.
love barbecues down here in Tucson. We got so much mesquite wood.
Okay, okay. And you know what? That's such a great invitation, especially if, people have that in common. I mean, we kind of have a neighborhood organization right now that's just kind of communicating to everybody about different things like, painting numbers on your curb and things like that. I want to create this group as a separate group in my
Right.
neighborhood of, and so I really appreciate this conversation today because I got some ideas about how to start. And like I was thinking, if I could get 5 people, and I'm thinking I probably know 5 people right now who would be
Right.
willing to come to my house and let's just talk about what we could do. And I wouldn't have to, give them everything, like plan it all out for 6 months or anything like that. Just say, hey, I really think we need to do this. Where do we want to start?
Right.
And brainstorm. So thank you so much, Bobby, for bringing us together today and providing the information you did. I took a lot of screenshots, so I'm stealing things as much as I can, and I appreciate
Absolutely.
that.
And again, I will share the Google slide deck link, this recording with everybody who RSVP'd and obviously with you all here. Um, yeah, this is not proprietary information in any way. This is what needs to be spread right widely. So I appreciate that too, Lisa. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks, Michael. Good luck. I hope it works out for you.
Oh, thank
Okay, and I
you.
will just finish off with upcoming things that we do know about. And one thing that is missing here is March 8th is actually uh, International Women's Day. And the Women's March are also planning some nationwide events. So put that on your calendar. But this coming week, February 17th, 5051 and Indivisible have been sponsoring a national day of lobbying. So maybe, maybe it's a phone call into your congressional office, letting them know we demand impeachment of Kristi Noem. We demand the abolishment of ICE. If you have if you have questions on that, totally respond to the email or drop me a chat. I can share my contact info. um, that in the follow-up email of like, how do I get involved with this part? March 28th, somebody did say that is the national day of action for No Kings 3. And then May Day is a standard, it's Workers International Day, and that has been a traditional day of general strike. Um, Across the world, the United States kind of feels that we're sometimes separate than the rest of the world when it comes to labor and workers. But May Day is the National International Workers' Day here in the IE, Inland Empire, San Bernardino, Riverside area of California. We do have a May Day coalition. There probably is a May Day coalition in your area as well. And then for us in California, we have a primary election on June 2nd. And then I do have a link for the days of where all the rest of the country, where all of those primaries are happening. So those are the upcoming events and things that you could put on your calendar. Um, I do have a call scheduled in 2 weeks on a Saturday. I just had to change this week to Sunday because of a previous engagement that wasn't finalized until I had to change it. And then again, this presentation, we do have a Google Calendar here in the Inland Empire where we share community events. But then that relational organizing, this is the contact that this is the we know how to do this. We do know how to talk to folks. Like you said, Lisa, we do have a couple of folks that we can reach out to. And so it really is about that. And then if you had any additional questions or anything, but I do want to just thank you for taking the time, for being here, and being willing to hear and listen and learn and also share. I really appreciate. And then there's my email there, bobby.grow@gmail.com. So if you have any questions, and if you don't get the link in my follow-up email or anything, you can reach out to me directly. So thanks so much for being here, and for sharing your Sunday morning and afternoon.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
All
the
Have a
righty.
great day.
You too. You too. Thank you.
yeah, you guys have a
Bye
great day
bye.
too. Bye.